Hello there. Welcome into a Tuesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the new Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. When I listen to the radio station, obviously outside of this time slot, that's how I listen, is the app technology. Veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the program, and I'd love to get your thoughts on them. 719-247-1313 is both the text line and the phone line for your convenience. Now, we start with the biggest national story in the National Football League, but it does have some local interest to it. And that, of course, is the shocking's probably too strong. It is the Jets, after all. Surprising decision today for the Jets to fire head coach Robert Saleh. And it's surprising, bordering on shocking, not because they fired somebody, but because they fired the wrong guy. What's the issue with the Jets right now? Is it their number one ranked defense or their 27th ranked offense? Robert Saleh runs the defense. I know he's the head coach, but usually there is a way you go about this, right? If you're looking to scapegoat somebody, you start with the coordinator, yes? Well, you wouldn't do anything to the defensive coordinator because he's essentially the head coach. Jeff Ulbrich is behind him as the actual defensive coordinator. You look to the side of the football that is failing you. That's the offense for the Jets. Nathaniel Hackett should be the one. If Woody Johnson was so upset that his team looked terrible in front of all of his UK buddies, because if you remember, Woody Johnson was an ambassador to that country. So if you're looking for the right guy, be Nathaniel Hackett, wouldn't it? So why didn't they? It's genuinely curious why the Jets did not fire Nathaniel Hackett. Except it's not. And now we get more of the story from Jonathan Jones of CBS. In the last hour, he wrote that Robert Saleh was considering firing Nathaniel Hackett, and then in some weird twist of fate, it was actually Saleh who got fired. Why would this be? Brian Windhorst fingers. What is going on in New York? Well, you know. You cannot fire a friend, an FOR, if you will, a friend of Rodgers, or an FOA, a friend of Aaron. Now, this is not the report, but we're heading in this direction. Somebody is going to report that word got to Aaron Rodgers that Robert Saleh was going to make that change. And by the way, Robert Saleh firing Nathaniel Hackett is just him putting Nathaniel Hackett in front of himself like a human shield. right? But this is the way it goes. You're having troubles on one side of the football or the other. You fire the man that heads up that side of the football. So it would be self-preservation on why Robert Saleh would fire Nathaniel Hackett. But in a world that is not controlled by ayahuasca, that would be the move, to fire Nathaniel Hackett. So we're heading into a direction where the Jets were getting ready to fire Nathaniel Hackett, and Aaron Rodgers stepped in and said no. Because that's the power that he wields in this organization. And I got to say, at some level, I got to hand it to Aaron Rodgers. I really do. We all desire what Aaron Rodgers has created. We all strive to make our workplace the best possible workplace for ourselves. And Aaron Rodgers has done it. Aaron Rodgers has picked where he wants to work, New York. When he wants to work, not during mandatory minicamp. Who he wants to work with, Nathaniel Hackett, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb last year. And now he gets to pick who he works for, essentially. And that not being Robert Saleh. He's done it. He's done it because you think Jeff Ulbrich is going to have anything to say to Aaron Rodgers? Do you think Jeff Ulbrich is going to go to Aaron Rodgers in the quarterback meeting room and say, hey, dude, you got to pick up your play? Of course not. Did Robert Saleh do that? I have questions on whether he did. I don't feel like Robert Saleh ruled the New York Jets with an iron fist. But as we suspected a couple of weeks ago, Aaron Rodgers pushing away Robert Saleh was not just because he's not a big hugger. Aaron Rodgers, to some degree, does not like Robert Saleh. And you add that to the fact that Nathaniel Hackett is his boy. And so the Jets skip a step. Instead of firing a coordinator, like most teams do, they fired their head coach. By the way, and I know he was around the team. What are we looking at here? 5, 6 games? Essentially, with Aaron Rodgers on the field. And now Robert Saleh is gone. That's all he got with Aaron Rodgers. I fully believe that the Jets were getting ready to fire Nathaniel Hackett. And now this report from CBS tells me that I'm right. But the question is, why the change of heart? Was Robert Saleh going to do it, and then he just couldn't pick up the phone fast enough, and Woody Johnson walked into his office and said, you're fired? Or was this going to happen, and then someone who, with all due respect to Woody Johnson, runs the New York Jets, said, no, not him, him. And is this, because the ultimate question here is this going to be what the Jets need? And I look at the firing of Robert Saleh and saying, what does it help? Again, Robert Saleh is the head coach, and there's some responsibilities that go along with that. Certainly. But the side of the football that he runs is the best thing about the New York Jets right now. The worst thing about the New York Jets, the lesser thing about the New York Jets, is that they have a 40-year-old quarterback coming off a season-long Achilles injury, playing behind an improved but not vastly improved offensive line, and they can't run the football. How much of that falls on Robert Saleh? Does it fall more on him than it does Nathaniel Hackett? Does it even fall? Because firing these coaches, coordinators, coaches, we've seen this with the Broncos, right? You've seen this before. Seasons, head coaches getting fired in the season, coordinators getting fired in the season, coaches reassigned, play calling duties taken away. You are well versed if you follow the Denver Broncos and how all of this goes. How much has any of those moves in that season ultimately changed the trajectory of the Denver Broncos? Because, yes, firing Nathaniel Hackett did lead to hiring Sean Payton, which obviously was a move in the right direction. But when they fired him, few games left, sure, it looked a little bit better, but it didn't greatly change their fortunes. The Jets are banking on, because of when they are doing this, that it will essentially save their season. And these moves rarely do. So what I chalk this up to is an owner fed up, throwing a tantrum, wanting a human sacrifice, looking in the direction he should be looking if he were wanting to do that, and Aaron Rodgers stepping in and saying, no, do not fire Nathaniel Hackett, fire Robert Saleh. At the very least, this is the credit I could give the New York Jets. At least they didn't name Nathaniel Hackett their coach. Even Aaron Rodgers himself could not say that that would be the best move. And I would fully expect it to be that Woody Johnson at least asked Aaron Rodgers his thoughts, and he was like, yeah, Jeff Ulbricht's okay. Yeah, we don't need to make Nathaniel Hackett the head coach. Even he saw what happened in Denver. I don't know how this fixes the Jets. And this is not me standing up necessarily for Robert Saleh. All I'm saying is the guy, if you're going to fire somebody, Hackett makes more sense, except when you throw in the variable of Aaron Rodgers in his buddy-buddy relationship with Nathaniel Hackett. Nathaniel Hackett owes Aaron Rodgers a great debt. The Broncos hired Nathaniel Hackett only because they thought they were getting Aaron Rodgers. Nathaniel Hackett's employment history over the last 3 years is only because of Aaron Rodgers. And I don't quite understand the dynamic enough to know why Aaron Rodgers is so loyal to Nathaniel Hackett. I don't know that this saves the New York Jets. And if anything, by firing Robert Saleh instead of Nathaniel Hackett, it just further underlines who is in charge of that organization. And allowing a 40-year-old athlete to dictate everything you do in your organization is the sign of an unserious, dysfunctional franchise. So it makes perfect sense that the two organizations currently that have decided to do that are the Los Angeles Lakers and the New York Jets. We'll see if it works out for either one of them. 719-247-1313 is the number if you want to give your thoughts on the Jets firing Robert Saleh. Should it have been Hackett? Or maybe you go the other way because you're missing Nathaniel Hackett so much here in Broncos country. Should Nathaniel Hackett have been named the head coach? So there's that. Just getting going on this Tuesday edition, Drive Time Sports. Coming up next, a trend that is becoming more noticeable that the Broncos would be wise to jump in on if only they had the right people to pull it off. Drive Time Sports, glad to have you. Last night, the Kansas City Chiefs wrapped up week 5 with a win over the Saints. Some news that would pertain to the Denver Broncos. Derek Carr left that game and is now being reported that he is expected to not only miss the Saints' next game, but also the Thursday nighter against the Broncos with this oblique injury he sustained. And he was talking after the game last night, and he said it wasn't a hit or anything. He just torqued his body to throw a ball and hurt himself. So that is potentially significant news and a significant development as it pertains to that football game in a couple weeks' time. And it feeds into one of the big questions that I have for you today, and I will myself answer when it comes to the Denver Broncos and how much the perception of this team has changed after not only the Raiders win, but the last 2 wins before that. But the Chiefs did something very interesting last night. They went an entire quarter without targeting a wide receiver. Now, you can chalk this up to the injury to Rashee Rice, and you say, well, who are they going to target? Well, they ended up targeting Juju Smith-Schuster enough to win the football game. And yes, some of that is out of necessity given the Chiefs roster. But I think there's something additional to it. And this goes back to something I talked about last week when it comes to the Washington Commanders and what they are doing, because everyone's trying to figure out what this secret formula Cliff Kingsbury has to have Jaden Daniels performing not just at a historic level for rookies, but a historic level for quarterbacks at this point in the season ever, in terms of how efficient he has been. We know what NFL defenses, it's been well documented, what they are doing in order to try and take some of the power back, to tilt the scales a little bit more in their direction, because more and more teams, not really the Denver Broncos, which is kind of the irony, is that they are bucking a current trend with the way that they play defense. But a lot of teams are going with the Vic Fangio, and a lot of different people can be attached to this kind of defense, but it's basically, right, move people back, move the safeties back, keep everything in front of you. Bend but don't break. Don't allow the big play. Explosive plays lose you football games, and explosive plays lose defensive coordinators their jobs. And that's led to offenses being down, scoring being down. So if there is going to be a pendulum swing back the other way, you would want to look to the brightest minds on the offensive side of the football to kind of see where things are going. And it's still early, but I looked at Cliff Kingsbury and what he's doing. I see what Andy Reid is doing. I look at the Minnesota Vikings because of what Sam Darnold's been able to do and Kevin O'Connell's doing. And I look at some of these and I notice something. A lot of these teams, Chiefs, have 2 tight ends among their top 4 receivers. The Commanders have a tight end and a running back as 2 of their top receivers. Minnesota has a back and a tight end. Baltimore has utilized a bevy of tight ends. And until just this past Sunday, those tight ends were anyone not named Mark Andrews. New Orleans, running back, tight end, their fifth leading receiver, also a tight end. You also notice when those teams are playing that they have multiple tight ends on the field. The most popular personnel grouping is 11 personnel, which is one tight end. But what you've seen early in the season and in preseason is there's less of that, more of 12 personnel, even a little bit more 13 personnel, 12 personnel being 2 tight ends, 3 personnel being 3 tight ends. Washington has used 3 tight ends quite a bit this season. So still early, but there are some trends to pay attention to, and they are being led by the people that are being heralded as the most progressive, most gifted offensive minds in the league. So the question is, why isn't Sean Payton doing this? Well, he's doing it kind of. And here's what I mean by this. Javonte Williams is one of the Broncos' leading receivers. Okay, so I believe that Sean Payton is seeing what's going on. And he has relied a lot on Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin to a lesser extent. And the play calling for Bo Nix has, I think, kind of been a nod to what is going on. Right? And it's hard to separate how much of the play calls he's making are to protect Bo Nix and how much of it is a reaction to the way that defenses are now starting to play. But I think both are kind of mixed in there. But you know the reason why we haven't seen the Denver Broncos do a lot of the same things that these other teams are doing. They don't have the tight ends. They don't have the tight ends. They don't have one legitimate receiving tight end, let alone 2, let alone justifying having 3 of them out there. Greg Dulcich was even inactive on Sunday. So the reason to me, I think that Sean Payton is noticing this. Certainly when you talk about the brightest minds in the NFL, Sean Payton is one of them. I think he sees this. And he's trying to do what he can in order to combat it. But I just don't think he has the personnel to go quite all in the way some of these other teams have. And this is also part of the reason why he's stressed the running game so much. It's not just because a running game is a young quarterback's best friend, but it's also because of the way defenses are now playing. So I think Sean Payton's trying, but he's trying with the personnel that he has. So it'll be interesting to see how much more prevalent the 12, 13, even 13, and 13 is going to be quite rare. Not a lot of teams have 3 tight ends that they feel are worth throwing out there, and some teams have multiple receivers that they really like. So it doesn't work for everyone. Not everyone's going to do it. But on the whole, it'll be interesting to see how much more prevalent this becomes. We always talk about the NFL being a copycat league. Well, there's no team right now that's more in vogue than the Washington Commanders. Right? What they're doing, the success they're having with a rookie quarterback is going to be noticed. And these are the kind of things that they're doing. And it also fortifies my belief that the Kansas City Chiefs are not getting ready to make some major acquisition at the position of wide receiver. Because I think that they know what they need to do. And by the way, they have arguably the best tight end in football. Yes, Travis Kelce is still that. I don't think they're going to give up a ton to land a wide receiver. I think they need one. They need a body, but we've seen the last couple of years, Mecole Hardman, Kadarius Toney, they don't exactly swing for the fences. In the way NFL defenses are playing, Kansas City might be right in not going out and spending a ton of draft capital trying to land a receiver to replace Rashee Rice. So that's what I'm noticing. Problem is the Broncos can't quite replicate that. Now, as far as Javonte Williams, him, and I said this going into the Jets week, Javonte Williams has to hear the discussion that he's never going to get back to what he was before the injury. Tyler Bidet should be the Broncos lead back, all this kind of stuff. And finally, well, he responded against the Jets, played well, I thought, against the Raiders, and finally responded and said basically, like, I heard what people were saying. And so absent quality tight ends, a running game is also a very good thing to have the way that NFL defenses are playing. So if Javonte Williams can keep up what he's doing, getting back to breaking tackles and things like that, that's another way that the Broncos combat some of this. And you know that's what Sean Payne wants to do. In fact, some of the things that would be successful against these kind of defenses are things that Sean Payton has done dating back to his time with New Orleans. Running the football, passing it out of the backfield to running backs. He's doing that with Javonte Williams. The problem was the first few weeks, they weren't getting anything out of him in that regard. Now they are. And it's why part of the reason why their offense has been a bit more productive over the past couple of weeks, at least in terms of the running game. So Chiefs keep on winning. And now the Saints are going to be without their quarterback for the next couple of games. Take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. Coming up next, yes, the NHL season technically already started in Europe over the weekend. It starts stateside here today. Avs start tomorrow night. So it's time to start talking hockey. And when it comes to the Colorado Avalanche, could they be taking a page out of the Denver Nuggets book? I'll explain next on Extra Sports 1300. NHL season only begins when games are played in the United States. I held the same standard when it came to baseball. What happened in South Korea with the Padres and Dodgers? Fun little exhibition that counted towards their records. But baseball didn't officially start till games were played on United States soil. And I hold hockey to the same standard, except with the caveat that North America in general. Doesn't have to be the United States of America, North America, though. So what happened between the Sabres and the Devils? That's great for those fans over there. I didn't watch. I'm watching today. In fact, I've got Seattle and St. Louis up on the television in the studio, and the Kraken are all over Les Bleus, 2-0 in the second period. And if you're an Avs fan, the NHL season may not begin until tomorrow night, when the Avalanche will be in action against the Vegas Golden Knights. And oh boy, did hockey season come up quickly. Seemed like just yesterday, I thought that hockey season would never get here, and now here it is. You know what's hanging over the Colorado Avalanche right now, and their major storylines going into the year. But here's another one. Could they be taking a page out of the Nuggets book? And here's what I mean by that. The Denver Nuggets, or at least one member of that organization, strongly feels like the way for the Nuggets to sustain their championship window and continue to compete for all the years that Nikola Jokic is available is to build through the draft. Young guys supplementing this roster. Now, I think he may be taking a step too far when it comes to replacing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope with Christian Brown, but that is a battle that I'm not going to wage anymore because I know what it's about. I don't even know if Calvin Booth, if the second apron didn't exist, would have let Kentavious Caldwell-Pope go. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But I know that the apron is the biggest reason why Christian Brown is now in the Nuggets starting five and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is in Orlando. But I understand where Calvin Booth is coming from when it comes to the depth on this team. Like, you just can't buy out market, high-priced veteran backup your way. You just can't with what's going on in the NBA. And it's going to cost you even without a second apron, right? Because there is a salary cap and all owners have their limit. The Avalanche tomorrow night will have many young players, a handful of young players playing. Callum Ritchie, much ballyhooed prospect. Yvonne, whose middle name is not Yvonne, but his first and last name are. It looks like Ivan. It is pronounced Yvonne. He'll be there. Sam Malinsky, who you saw a little bit of last year, is going to be playing on the blue line. And I am missing one. Oh, Nikolai Kovalenko. You throw in Justus Ananen, and that's a young group of Avs that are going to be, and Ananen will obviously be backing up Georgiev. It's a bigger group of young players than we are accustomed to seeing the Avs have. So while it may appear that they're taking a page out of the Nuggets book, they in fact are not. They're doing this out of necessity Because while you know that Valeri Nichushkin and Gabriel Landeskog will not be available to the Colorado Avalanche tomorrow night or for the foreseeable future, don't forget Arturi Lehkonen also out because of the surgery that he had over the offseason. So if the Avs were fully healthy and everyone was available, you would not see maybe one spot on and in you would see. He'd be there. But these forwards, my guess would be everyone healthy, you would not see them. But they're doing it out of necessity. But necessity is the mother of invention. And here's what I mean by that. This is a great way to find out a team that has lacked young talent coming through their system for the last few years. And you know why? Because in their pursuit of a Stanley Cup, they have flipped a lot of their draft capital in order to get veteran players. But I think early on in the season, one of the things you're going to be watching out for, whether it's Kovalenko, whether it's Ivan, whether it's Callum Ritchie, and even to a lesser degree, Sam Malinsky, are any of these guys worth something? Avs saw Sam Malinsky last year, and they still went out and added on the blue line. Now, surprisingly to me, they got rid of Eric Brandstrom, and that opened up the spot for Malinsky. I was surprised that the Avalanche did that. But getting back to the Nuggets, I think it's a good move. I think it's actually necessary to develop young talent. Avs have not held on to their draft capital the way that the Nuggets have. So it's reasonable to say that the Avs don't have quite the young help on the way that the Denver Nuggets do. But at some point, Ivan, Kovalenko, Ritchie, you're going to need these guys. This year, next year. So while the Avalanche organization is in somewhat of a holding pattern, and that's kind of the feeling I get going into tomorrow night. Like, I'm happy, don't get me wrong, happy hockey is back. But with the Avs, it's just you can look at other things, but they're just in kind of this holding pattern. And it's not really Landeskog, because I think when Gabriel Landeskog comes back, it's going to be about leadership and vibes and maybe some depth. But it's really Nichushkin that is causing this feeling. Because the Avs, I don't think you can pick as a Stanley Cup winner without him. So until he gets back, the real business of this Avalanche season will really not begin. And the same goes for Arturi Lehkonen, but his absence is a little bit more normal. You're going to have guys coming off of surgery get banged up early in the season, and you'll be waiting for them to come back. But in the meantime, you can look at these young guys, especially Ritchie, and see if the Avs might have something in these guys in case somebody else gets hurt. or in case something goes awry with Valeri Nichushkin, or the same thing with Gabriel Landeskog's recovery. At some point, the Avs are going to need young players supplementing their roster. I love what they do and go out, and especially on the blue line this offseason, and get cheap guys that have high upside, but maybe haven't quite clicked. That's kind of why I thought Brandstrom was going to stick around, because he fits the mold of what the Avalanche have done to supplement the roster over the years. So the Avs do a lot right when it comes to team building. But there's this other part that I think is going to be necessary. If we look at Nathan MacKinnon in much the same way we look at Nikola Jokic and saying, hey, you got this guy, you got to maximize your window, you got to compete for as long as you possibly can. These young guys are going to help them do that. Two other early storylines. And yes, Nathan MacKinnon coming off of the MVP season, what does he look like? But I kind of know. Like, I would be shocked if Nathan MacKinnon has a slow start to the season or struggles this year. The two other things I'll be watching here early in the season, in addition to the young players, because I do find it interesting. Cale Makar and Alexander Georgiev. By Cale Makar's standards, he had a down year last year. And because he's just that good, he was still up for the Norris Trophy. But you look at his numbers, you look at his production, you just watch him. He wasn't at the peak of his powers. Getting him back to that level, I think, is vital to the Avs going deep in the playoffs this year. And certainly the way that Alexander Georgiev played in the postseason last year, my qualms with him have certainly been removed. Like, I know I've seen when it matters the most what Alexander Georgiev can do. But are we going to see that during the regular season? To get the Avs in the right playoff position, whatever that might be. I think winning the division is entirely possible for this team, but not if Georgiev has a regular season like he did last year. I think the Avs would like to win the division. And certainly early on with no Valeri Nichushkin, playing young forwards like they are, I think they're going to lean a little bit on Georgiev to get results over the first couple of months. And oh, by the way, he's in a contract year. So those are the two early storylines for the Avs, but ultimately the things you're watching for: Gabriel Landeskog's return, and then what of Valeri Nichushkin. And it's why I can't, and we'll get more into this tomorrow, but why I can't endorse the Colorado Avalanche win the Stanley Cup this year. I got to see this other stuff. I got to find out what happens until I can fully assess what this team is, because the team that they're going to put out on the ice tomorrow night, even if you put in your mind Arturi Lehkonen back in the lineup, I don't think they're the best team in the West. And if they were in the East, I think they'd be like a 5 or 6 seed. That's how stacked the Eastern Conference is. The West is weaker. But until this team is whole again, and what whole looks like, I don't think they're better than Edmonton. I don't think they're better than Dallas. They may not be better than Vancouver. So I'm not down on the. I think they'll make the playoffs. I think they'll be one of the top few seeds. But until all of this stuff comes together, I think they're kind of heading for the same fate they've had the last couple of years, which is falling short of ultimately where they think they should be. 719-247-1313. Take your predictions for the upcoming NHL season, including, and maybe most importantly, the Colorado Avalanche. Coming up next, we'll get into the Denver Broncos. A fair amount of Broncos talk coming your way, as you would expect. Leading off with perhaps the most prevalent question in Broncos country right now. Given what you have seen to this point, are the playoffs a realistic possibility for this football team? Get into that next. Drive Time Sports on a Tuesday. Welcome in. Ryan Kaufman with you. Appreciate those of you watching the show on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300, Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube. Not that I don't appreciate you listening to the show on air, online, through the app. I do. Just wanted to mention that other way of consuming the show on a daily basis is available to you. And to shout out the people that do. 719-247-1313 is the number. And I expect your interaction on this. Because it is the question after Sunday. I said yesterday that the Broncos are fun again. They're interesting. They're more enjoyable to watch. It's not a chore to watch this football team. And it seemed like Empower Field was a whole lot of fun on Sunday. But you kind of come down a little bit. And you start looking at things rationally and analyzing a little bit more. What does this mean? What we're seeing from the Denver Broncos. And ultimately, the question is, playoffs? Is that realistic now for this football team? And for me, I certainly can say that I feel differently about this football team than I did going into the season. What I am seeing tells me that they will more than likely exceed my expectation, which was 5, maybe 6 wins. I think they can get more than that. But the dream of a postseason berth for the Denver Broncos, I think we're a little bit early on that. Because ultimately where this team is at is one game better than I thought they would be through 5 weeks. They've won one more game than I thought they would over the first 5 weeks. I still look around the AFC, and right now, the Denver Broncos would be in a playoff spot, but you know what the date is, and you know how much more football there is to play. I still look across the NFL and I look at their schedule and I say, right now, I am certain that the Denver Broncos, forget home and away, whether they play these teams at home or away, because there are other factors that I think are much more prevalent when it comes to success in the NFL than simply home field advantage. 3 teams remaining on the Broncos schedule that I know the Broncos are better than: Cleveland, Carolina, and Vegas. That's it. Do I think that the Broncos are better than Kansas City? Better than Baltimore? Better than Atlanta? Better than the Colts with Joe Flacco? No, I can't sit here and say definitively that they are. So I look at the landscape in the AFC and I still say, forget where the records are. Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Miami with Tua. Just off the top of my head, I think they're all still better than the Denver Broncos. Houston. So the math to me doesn't work out in terms of how many teams in the AFC do I believe that the Denver Broncos are better than. I still think, is it a smaller number than it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? Absolutely. But are they one of the 7 best teams in the AFC? No, I don't think that they're one of the 7 best teams right now in the AFC. But when I was on KKTV last night with Jessica Mendoza, we were talking a little bit about the identity of this Denver Broncos team. And I believe I used the phrase Steeler-like. And it's heavy on the defense, run game, quarterback don't make mistakes, and will rely on our opponents to make those mistakes. Right? It's how Sean Payton, even dating back to last year, has coached this team. Even with Russell Wilson, he was this way. Once the defense came around, they tried to run the football. They tried to limit turnovers, hoping the game would be close at the end, and that's where Sean Payton would dial up a key play that would win them the game. That was the formula. That's what the Steelers have been doing for years under Mike Tomlin. And where has that gotten Pittsburgh? 8 wins, 9 wins, right? Never a losing record, but rarely an outstanding record. But where the Steelers most years, and I don't want to take away credit from Mike Tomlin because I do think that he's a good coach, but you look at the Steelers and it's like last year, for instance, they actually got an additional win. They got 10 wins to get in the postseason. But you look and they played a Cincinnati team without Joe Burrow twice. Relying on, being buttoned up, disciplined, keeping the game close. That was their MO. But it kind of expands beyond any one game. It's kind of how they got into the postseason last year. You look at these 8-9 win seasons, they only, out of the 4 that they've had lately, they only made the playoffs in one of those years. But I think the Steelers, in a lot of ways, rely on their opponent and their mistakes or things that happen to their opponent rather than anything that they do to win games. I feel that same thing with the Denver Broncos. And even the games that they won last year. And during that winning streak, you look at some of those games and you see the quarterbacks they were going against or the mistakes that their opponents made that were huge towards the Broncos winning those football games. And I feel like the Broncos are trying to do that same thing this year. That Sean Payton is trying to make this team as buttoned up as they can, hoping that the opponents will falter or trying to do it. I don't want to, again, what their defense is doing is great. And they can force some of those mistakes, certainly. But I think that kind of thing has to happen the rest of the way for the Denver Broncos to get into the postseason. I look at the remaining schedule and I say something bad would have to happen to some of these teams in order for the Broncos to win these games. And lo and behold, what do we have here? Derek Carr going to miss their game with the Denver Broncos in a couple of weeks. All of a sudden, changes a little bit how you look at that game. So I feel like the way the Broncos are currently playing these games is kind of how they have success throughout the season. They establish this baseline of we're going to be just this good, and that's going to be enough. And time will ultimately tell whether it is. Last year wasn't. I don't see that it's going to be this year. I'll tell you there's a couple of different ways that where you can ask me this question again, Broncos playoffs, and I may change my answer. One is this team, I don't think their formula for winning games, what they are as a team, is good enough to make the playoffs in a conference with dynamic offenses, high-level quarterbacking like Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, CJ Stroud. I just don't see it right now. So if, say, Bo Nix would start airing it out and be successful in that, all of a sudden that's the Broncos adding another dimension. Now they're a better team than they are right now. Whether Sean Payton's going to let that happen or not is a question. But they would have to add some other dynamic to who they are for me to change my perspective. And the easiest way for them to do that, the defense certainly can do more than they're doing. It's the passing game of the Denver Broncos. So that's one way. If that starts emerging, now it changes things a little bit. But if the way Sean Payton is coaching Bo Nix through the first 5 games holds for most of this season, then I don't see myself changing my perspective on this team. The other part is the next 2 games. I think the next 2 games go a much longer way to changing my mind about the Broncos and their postseason chances than certainly beating the Raiders. I expected them to beat the Raiders. Going into the season last week, I expected them to beat the Raiders. So it doesn't change a ton when it comes to that. But now you're going to face an LA team that was banged up coming off of a bye week. So they're going to be healthier in some way. Right? So you get a Chargers team coming off of their bye, and then you have a short week to go down to New Orleans. Derek Carr, no Derek Carr. That's a tough turn for the Denver Broncos. Certainly, I like their chances more if Derek Carr doesn't play. Maybe Saints fans would disagree with me after his performance last night, but I still think Derek Carr gives them a better chance to win than whatever that backup's name was that came into that game late last night. If the Denver Broncos win these next 2, and I'm being serious here, if this happens, if this scenario happens, then I will change my tune. If they win the next 2 games, certainly they're going to beat Carolina. That's another one of those games like Going into the year, I thought the Broncos would win. And after every week of this season that has gone by, I feel better and better about the Broncos' chances at home with a pseudo bye week, right? That's the upside of the short turnaround to Thursdays. You get more time for your next opponent. Certainly, Carolina is not an opponent that I feel the Denver Broncos need to get extra time to prepare for. All of a sudden, we're talking about a 6-win football team with 9 left. If the magic number is at least 10, and given that the Broncos have been able to play a Chargers team that I think is better than them, coming off of a bye, they win again, turn around on a short week, Derek Carr, win down in New Orleans, and beat Carolina, this team could go 4-5. So I think they got to win the next 2. Well, the next 3 really, but I fully expect them to beat Carolina. This week and the Thursday, I am not as confident that the Denver Broncos will win. If they win the next 3, then I think you can seriously contemplate the Broncos making the playoffs. Anything short of that, I still think they have a math problem. And I still think they're going to need teams in the AFC to falter. But there's no doubt that this team has changed the way I look at them. They're better than I thought they would be. The defense, even though I like the Broncos defense, is better than I thought it would be. And now I'm saying Sean Payton's got to let Bo Nix is a peacock. Sean Payton's got to let him fly. I've seen enough from Bo Nix. What he did with those 2 throws in the Jets game, what I've seen him do early in the Tampa game and then late in the Raider game, it's time to give him more. It's time to let him showcase more. The way that Javonte Williams has run the ball the last 2 weeks, now that's coming around. Don't get me wrong, this is still a flawed roster in many ways. But they're better. And to me, if this team gets to 7 or 8 wins, they don't really sniff the playoffs. But my goodness, how could you say that that's not the absolute best case scenario that this team had in front of it when the season started? So the good news is that the Broncos are better than I thought they were. And they've at least changed my perspective that much. But I still think coming off of beating a team they should have beaten, I'm not ready to make the ultimate leap. Come find me about 3 weeks. 719-247-1313. Think the Broncos are a playoff team? Have they changed your mind or solidified your belief in them, depending on where you were to start the season? I'll take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Sean Payton with more thoughts on the little dust up between he and Bo Nix on the sideline on Sunday. Are you thinking playoffs for the Denver Broncos after their recent showing? 719-247-1313. You can call or text in your thoughts. Brett says, what's a couple of good breaks and a couple of favorable calls from the referees? I think the Denver Broncos can still go 4-13. So there's one in the nay column. Steve G says, for the Broncos to make the playoffs, the offense has to play as good or better than the defense. When the offense gets a turnover, must be 7, no field goals, no excuses. I guess I'm with Brett and Steve to an extent in saying, no, this is not currently a playoff team. But I will say that I am more bullish on the Denver Broncos than Brett is. I do think they will win more than 4 games. Brett also adds, Mike Tomlin has been making chicken soup out of chicken. You know what? More than any other coach, it would be interesting to see what kind of record he would put together if his team actually had average to above average talent outside of TJ Watt. It would be. It would be. And Mike Tomlin is a really good coach. But I'll tell you a couple of things that this team needs to do to try and get more. Now, Najee Harris is talented. I don't know that he's an elite talent the way that TJ Watt is. But there are 2 things. One, this team could go out and get Devontae Adams or just get more receiver help. Devontae Adams would obviously be the best receiver they could get, but it is clear the Pittsburgh Steelers need more help at receiver. And now it seems like teammates are kind of turning on George Pickens a little bit. They need more. And obviously, this was a team that was heavily involved in the Brandon Ayuk thing, trying to get him. So it's not like the Steelers don't know this. So if they can add another weapon, whether it be Devontae Adams or an Amari Cooper, which, fat chance the Cleveland Browns trade Amari Cooper to Pittsburgh, or DeAndre Hopkins, or any of the names that you've heard bandied about, they need help at receiver. And they need to do the thing, or I should put it this way. They need to not do the thing that I think they're getting ready to do. Mike Tomlin saying that Russell Wilson's healthy. Don't do it, Mike. Do not do it. Think Russell Wilson is going to get more out of this offense than Justin Fields? You're nuts. You're absolutely nuts if you think Russell Wilson can get more out of this offense than Justin Fields can. And you're nuts if you think that Russell Wilson gives you more, just he himself, than what Justin Fields can bring you. I think the Steelers are about to do the thing that I absolutely think they should not do. And I think that there are forces at play here. Look, we just saw a head coach get fired today instead of an offensive coordinator because of the power that a certain quarterback wields. Not saying that Russell Wilson has that level of clout, but Dating back to his time in Denver, he had some clout. And to keep him on the bench healthy, maybe the Steelers aren't willing to do that. They should resist. Mike Tomlin is certainly entrenched in his job. If he wasn't let go, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, he's not getting let go because he kept Justin Fields in over Russell Wilson. I implore Mike Tomlin, let Omar Khan find another wide receiver for you. Demand that he does. And keep Justin Fields in there. Do not go the route you're thinking of going down. And I think he's at least contemplating going down that road because he said that Russell Wilson was healthy. But that's their problem. Sean Payton had some further comments, after the odd Ferris Bueller comments he had on Sunday, that all relating to Bo Nix coming over the sideline after he apparently audibled out of a run play, bombed it downfield to Troy Franklin. Should have been a 45-yard touchdown, but it was dropped. And then that exchange on the sideline, Sean Payton said after the game that there's still some Ferris Bueller in this quarterback. I still don't think that reference landed with even people who are fully aware of who Ferris Bueller was and enjoyed that film. I don't think it's one of Sean Payton's best. But he was asked about it again, and he said he loved the response from Bo Nix when he came over to the sideline, saying it's competitive, he's fiery, and look, we're in the business of passion. We're looking for passion, and we're looking for people that have passion for the game, not other things. He later said it was nothing, but by saying what he said before that, it's really not nothing, but it's not the negative that maybe some people try to make it out as. I was not one of those people. One, I didn't think it was a negative because I thought Bo Nix was in the right. But I go back to Sean Payton berating Russell Wilson on the sideline, and the reason why that was such a bad look and a worse look than the dust up between Sean Payton and Bo Nix was because Russell Wilson just stood there. And it was bad either way. No matter whose side you took, it was bad if you were on Sean Payton's side because you knew, you're not getting that competitive. That's what it was always about. And you didn't see it from Russell Wilson. So if you're on Sean Payton's side, it was a bad look. But because of the way Russell Wilson reacted or did not react. If you're a Russell Wilson fan or supporter, then obviously it was a bad look because it just looked like Sean Payton was berating him. But he loves everything about Bo Nix. And that's part of who Bo Nix is. Again, could he be a little less demonstrative? Could it be a conversation and not him, hitting his hands together and being that demonstrative about it? Sure. He could dial it back a little bit. But that exchange was absolutely a positive because Sean Payton wants his quarterback to be fiery, to be competitive, even if it's going at him. And everything you heard about Sean Payton, he wants to be challenged. He's even said it, like he's been challenging himself and the coaching staff to find the right way to handle Bo Nix to give him all he needs to be successful. Drew Brees challenged him. And that on Sunday was Bo Nix challenging him. And we'll never know exactly what was said, or maybe we'll never know. But it sure looked like I saw this, so I audibled, and we nearly hit a 45-yard touchdown pass. Now, I don't know if Sean Payton used that opportunity to try and bring it out of Bo Nix. I don't know if after Bo Nix had that pass drop that he's like, you know what? I'm going to challenge this guy. I'm going to say something and see if it sets him off. I don't know if Sean Payton was doing that. That feels like a bit too much credit. It felt a little bit more spontaneous. But it's good. And I think it endeared Bo Nix to a lot more Broncos fans, or made the Broncos fans that already like Bo Nix like him even more. And it's not an anti-Sean Payton thing. Remember, the last young quarterback the Broncos had in was a little bit more chill. You wondered about the competitive nature of the last young quarterback that the Broncos had. After an exchange like that, there's little doubt that Bo Nix is competitive. He is. And I think the reaction locally was the right one, and some people nationally, as they tend to do, kind of missed the mark with their assessment. I think following along with the Denver Broncos, know that was a good thing. That was a healthy thing. 719-24-7, 1313. Continue to take your thoughts. Are you thinking playoffs with this Broncos team after this 3-game winning streak? And if not, what do you need to see from this team? I already laid out mine. They got to win the next 3. They got to win the next 3. And then I think the math will math to get this team to at least 10 wins. But don't forget, Baltimore, Kansas City twice, Cincinnati. Forget their record. Look at what Joe Burrow's doing. Cincinnati's still a good football team. Atlanta. They are starting to leave the easier portion of their schedule. But what do you need to see? 719-24-7, 1313. More Drive Time Sports after this. Couple of updates on some scores. Things have taken a turn in Seattle for you hockey fans. St. Louis now, early in the third period, has come back from 2 goals down. They lead Seattle 3-2. And probably in the more consequential game of the day, the Mets are up 2-0 on the Philadelphia Phillies in a pivotal game 3. I still think we're heading toward Phillies in 5. But I know people who are fans of both of those teams. They are both sweating. You talk to Phillies and Mets fans, and you would think that there actually is not going to be a winner of this series. Both teams are going to lose. And the winner of the Padres-Dodgers series is just going to go on to the World Series. But those are the kind of fan bases that I identify with. That's the kind of fan I grew up being. And then all this crazy stuff with Jokic and McKinnon and Mahomes come along. And then as a sports fan, I'm one of the most spoiled that you could possibly have over the last few years. But I grew up that way where I wanted my teams to win. I rooted for my teams to win. I rarely ever believed they would win. And really, growing up, Nuggets, Rockies, Chiefs fan, who could blame me? But I live a very different life right now as a sports fan. And I still don't think I've grown into it. I don't think if it suits me. I think I'm better when my teams are awful. Although this show would not be nearly as fun to do. But the winner of the Phillies-Mets series, and there will be a winner of that series, will go on to play the winner of the Dodgers-Padres series, and the winner of that series will go to the World Series. There is a chance that either the Phillies or the Mets will actually win the World Series, despite what you may hear from those two fan bases. They're both, and I don't know how that's possible. You would think one would be supremely confident, the other may be wavering a little bit. Nope, both wavering. Small sample size, but a scientific poll nonetheless. So 2-0 Mets, bottom of the 6th in New York, and St. Louis up 3-2 on Seattle. I'll tell you the game that I am most looking forward tonight, although with what's transpired in the Dodgers-Padres series, I am looking forward to watching what happens in the Padres-Dodgers series. But this Utah-Chicago game tonight in the NHL, I'm very excited about. I love what Utah is doing. And I don't think it's a continuation of what I already felt about the Coyotes. Right? I thought that the Coyotes would take a step forward this year. I thought they were one of the up-and-coming teams in the National Hockey League, and that doesn't change with them changing cities. But what does change is their history. Because Gary Bettman, I guess this is why, maybe I need to give Ryan Smith, the owner of Utah Hockey Club and the Utah Jazz, maybe I need to give him credit. But whoever's idea this is, and whatever the reason, it's for the best. Utah's not assuming any of Arizona's history. And there's an easy joke to write there. Well, of course they're not. Who would want to own Arizona Coyotes history? But a team changes cities, they usually keep the history from where they were. And that's one of my big things that I don't like it. I don't think that should happen. Oklahoma City should have no stake in what happened with the Seattle Sonics, and so on and so forth. All the teams. So maybe it's easier because Arizona does not have a history that I think Utah would like to embrace. Or maybe it's because Gary Bettman is holding out hope that Phoenix will have a hockey team at some point. But I love the fact that Utah is starting over. I love that they're called Utah Hockey Club. I don't want them to become the Yeti, which they are going to become. They have a clean slate. They have a good young roster. And they have a great team name. Good color scheme. They're in a good city. I like everything about Utah Hockey Club. But the thing I love most is that they are not taking credit for Shane Doan. That stays in Arizona. So I'm very much so. And then obviously Connor Bedard. He's one of those guys that you tune in to watch. And I don't know if you've seen through the preseason, he's got a little, as Jared Bednar would say, a little sandpaper to his game. Young fella's grown up a little bit, mixing it up. So that will be 8 o'clock tonight. I believe they dropped the puck, and then 1 hour earlier, it's the Dodgers and the Padres, which I am also interested in. Couple more of your texts. The question of the day: are you thinking playoffs for the Denver Broncos after what you have seen? Here is Dave saying, if the Broncos can beat the refs in Kansas City, I say they're a playoff caliber team. The football team in Kansas City is actually called the Chiefs. The refs in Kansas City, I don't know what you're talking about, and I certainly wouldn't think that you are insinuating that the referees are in cahoots with the Kansas City Chiefs, because that would just be ridiculous. Bill Barnwell did yeoman's work a couple weeks ago. Do you know the quarterback that gets the most pass interference calls on his passes? It's not Mahomes, it's Burrow. And by the way, Juwan Taylor has, I think now, 25 penalties in the last 20 games. Chiefs get called for penalties. Stop that. Stop it now. And that game, look, that could, in all seriousness, going into Arrowhead and winning here in a few weeks, that would serve as a mind-changing win. Or even Baltimore. I have both of those chalked up as big fat L's for the Denver Broncos. But of course, it depends on what they do in the meantime. Going into Arrowhead and winning is not going to do a whole lot if they drop 2 of their next 3. I feel like you just brought that up to take a dig at me, which is fine. At least I can take it emotionally. Steve G says, I wonder if Nick's completed that long pass. What? That if Sean Payton would have said something to him? I think he would have. I think it's the way that Sean Payton is coached. Again, I don't know that he was trying to get a rise out of Bo Nix. But Sean Payton has a vision for Bo Nix. And that is until if either I script it, we have no other choice but to throw it, or the game has already been decided, like Sunday, you cannot throw the ball downfield. So touchdown or no, if Franklin catches that ball or what happened, I still think Sean Payton says something to him. I do. I think he says something to him. I think maybe it's in a more playful way. But I think Sean Payton wanted Bo Nix to run the play that he called. And because Bo Nix was frustrated that Troy Franklin dropped it, and also could be a little bit anxious because of how much he's been kind of put in a box and not really allowed to go downfield over the last couple of weeks. Maybe that factored into it a little bit. I 100% think Sean Payton would have said something. That's just who Sean Payton is. If Bo Nix audibled out of a play that he called, regardless of the success of the play, he would have said something. Dave chiming back in, you saying as an Avs fan that the 04 roster wasn't primed for a Stanley Cup? It's a very specific team that you're putting out there, and I would say no. I would say no, and I think you know that I would say no. From the 719, do you think the Utah team will embrace the Winnipeg Jets legacy? That's what I thought. Bettman is the Midas touch in reverse. He's totally ruined the NHL. Well, he's not helping it along, I think, just because of how awesome the sport is. I think that people are getting on board. I don't see anything that Gary Bettman has done except the Vegas thing. I will say that. Like, you got to say expanding to Vegas. Although, what was it? A $500 million, $250 million expansion fee? Like, that's an easy yes from Gary Bettman's case. So I won't push back against your other assertion. I don't think Utah would embrace the Winnipeg Jets because the Jets took back that era, I think, didn't they? They should have. Or did they take the Thrashers' legacy? Oh, you'll have to tell me. That's genuinely interesting. Did the Winnipeg Jets, do they assume the Atlanta Thrashers history? Or did they reclaim their Winnipeg Jets history? If they didn't, they should take back their Winnipeg Jets history. But I think now that I'm saying it out loud, I think Arizona had that, didn't they? Oh, this is a wrong that needs to be righted. And my gosh, what about the Thrashers? Do we even need to remember? There's nothing about the Thrashers that we need to recall or save for posterity. I guess I just assume Winnipeg took all the Winnipeg records. Did not know that. But the point is, Utah should not take anybody's history. Nobody's. They're starting fresh. That's exactly how it should be. Doesn't matter where the franchise has been. Utah Hockey Club, they're new. And tonight, Clayton Keller will become the all-time leader in goals in Utah Hockey Club history. And he will continue to add to his record as he moves through this year. That's a good question. Sneaky. By the way, Sunday, we were talking about Denver and LA. Denver 3-point dogs on their home field this Sunday against Los Angeles, who's coming off of a bye week. Found those that line on Circa Sports Colorado. Feel free to compare to your sports book of choice because it may be a little bit different. But one thing that you're going to notice with Circa Sports Colorado when you download the app, a lot of minus 110 splits. Sunday's game in Denver, no different. That's what they strive to do. Other sports books, they're a little bit more liberal, shall we say, with the minus 115, minus 120s. They keep as little money as possible on large market bets like futures, golf tournaments. They don't cap winners. They want you to flourish as much as any sports book wants any better to flourish. They just want a better experience. That's what they're trying to achieve with this app. And I've used other apps. You know that. This is now my app of choice. They've succeeded in their endeavor, in my opinion. Download the Circa Sports Colorado app today. Must be 21 years or older and present in Colorado to bet. Gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Hello there, Drive Time Sports on this Tuesday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Appreciate you tuning in, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming this show online at extrasports1300.com, or you're listening on the new Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well-being for all. Our sports calendar getting busier by the day. NHL season, at least in North America, is getting going today. They played a couple of games overseas over the weekend. Avs start up tomorrow night in Vegas. Of course, we got college football, NFL, baseball playoffs. And before you know it, the NBA will be here. It's a magical time of year for sports. Lot to talk about. And speaking of, here are the three stories that are driving the show. All right, story number one. The New York Jets have fired head coach Robert Saleh just a handful of games into a season that many people thought would end in a Super Bowl appearance for the Jets. So it's not quite going according to plan. Now, there's more to this story because there was a report earlier today from CBS that said that Robert Saleh was getting ready to fire Nathaniel Hackett before he himself was fired. Woody Johnson, the owner of the New York Jets, said the decision to fire Robert Saleh was his alone. And if you believe that, I have literally the swampland that the Jets Stadium is built on to sell you. This reeks of ayahuasca. This is Aaron Rodgers. At the very least, Aaron Rodgers, like all stars, has the ability to save their coach's job. I truly believe that. If Aaron Rodgers would have caught wind of Robert Saleh getting fired and vehemently disagreed with that decision, Robert Saleh would not have been fired. I promise you. Aaron Rodgers wields enough power within that organization that if he caught wind of this, he could have saved Robert Saleh's job. So that's at the very least. Now, piecing some of these reports together, and I don't even really need to do that because here was my initial reaction. Aaron Rodgers saved Nathaniel Hackett. Because whether Robert Saleh was getting ready to fire Nathaniel Hackett or not is really irrelevant. What's relevant is that the normal course of action for a team that is underperforming is to identify which coach is responsible for the underperforming side of the football. And once they find that, then they usually fire that coordinator. The New York Jets have one of the best defenses in the National Football League. That's part of Robert Saleh's job description, is running the defense. Conversely, the New York Jets are 27th in offense. A normal, functioning organization without a superstar that holds the team hostage would fire Nathaniel Hackett. And certainly there would be very few people that today would be saying, oh, I don't know if I like that move for the New York Jets. Whether Robert Saleh was going to fire Nathaniel Hackett or not is irrelevant, because the Jets would not fire Nathaniel Hackett, even if that's the thing that makes the most sense, because he has plot armor given to him by Aaron Rodgers. He must be a part of Aaron Rodgers' story in New York. And I got to hand it to Aaron Rodgers. He has created his ideal work environment. He chooses where he plays, when he plays. And I'm not talking about I should say that works. He chooses where he works. He chooses when he works, right? Mandatory minicamp? No, that's not for Aaron Rodgers. He chooses who his coworkers are, Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard. And now he's helping choose who his bosses are, as if he really has a boss. But in the organizational flow chart, the head coach is supposedly above the quarterback. But Aaron Rodgers has done it. He has done a thing that 9-to-5ers dream about being able to do. Work where you want, when you want, with who you want, and under who you want. And he has created all of that in New York. And guess what? It will not get the Jets any closer to their goals than they were 2 days ago. The issue with this team is that they have an offense led by a 40-year-old quarterback playing behind not a great offensive line, although they are better than they were a year ago. They cannot run the football, and they are being coordinated by a complete buffoon. That's their problem. Not much of that actually falls on Robert Saleh, as much as we have a bloodlust for coaches getting the axe. I don't know how much of what's gone on with the Jets you can really pin on Robert Saleh. This has Aaron Rodgers' fingerprints all over it, one way or another. He could have saved Robert Saleh. He could have said, Robert Saleh, I want fired. Or he could have taken door number 3, which is, you want to fire Hackett. No. If you want a human sacrifice, you don't touch a hair on Nathaniel Hackett's head. There are 2 organizations that operate this way. They are the Los Angeles Lakers and the New York Jets. And how many organizations are pining to replicate what the Lakers and the Jets are doing right now? I don't expect things to get a whole lot better. And if they do, the Jets will say, see, it was Robert Saleh. And it won't be. It won't be. And I don't know how much better they're going to get. Because Aaron Rodgers, and I don't fully understand what ayahuasca does. I don't think it reverses the aging process. And every day that goes by, Aaron Rodgers gets older. But Jets are going to jet, especially the Jets, who are basically run by Aaron Rodgers. Story number 2, same division. You want to talk about a division that is currently in shambles? The New England Patriots have announced that Drake May is going to start against the Houston Texans. Yes, arguably one of the best teams in the NFL, Houston Texans, with a vaunted pass rush that held Josh Allen to 3 of 20 throwing on just this past Sunday. And Gerard Mayo went, yeah, Drake May, it's your time, buddy. This is kind of the Patriots' version of doing what the Jets did, in a way. If you think about it, a fan base and probably ownership that is growing ever so much more impatient. doing something that may not be in their best interest, but just doing it to change the news cycle a little bit. Well, the Jets offense, pretty bad. Daniel Hackett hasn't gotten any better at this. Aaron Rodgers getting old. Well, Robert Saleh, we fired him. New England Patriots haven't won since week 1 against Cincinnati. Are one of the worst teams in the NFL. They look very bad on a weekly basis. Here's Drake May. So even the New England Patriots that I thought would be the one team that would be the most patient, other than Atlanta, but we know why. Michael Penix is not playing. It doesn't have anything to do with whether Michael Penix needs more time or doesn't. I actually thought that the New England Patriots were going to stick this thing out. I thought they were going to wait till late in the season to play Drake May, and it took them 5 weeks. And now we can add another rookie quarterback to the mix. I like Drake May. I think he might be right there in terms of talent, slightly below Caleb, right there with Jaden Daniels. If he's developed the right way, I don't know, given how raw he is and given how devoid of weapons and how bad the offensive line is of the New England Patriots, that we're going to see those signs from Drake May. Especially game 1 against the Houston Texans. Is everyone in that division in the NFC East or AFC East NFC East except for Washington, this would apply to. But everyone in the AFC East is absolutely losing their minds right now. Buffalo with the play calling at the end of regulation. The Miami Dolphins can barely move the ball down the field. The New England Patriots are throwing Drake May into the fire 5 weeks into the season, and the Jets are firing somebody who is not actually responsible for what their problems are. Remember that there was a time that division was looked at as maybe one of the best in the NFL? Remember when we thought the AFC West was going to be the best division in football just a few years ago? Yeah, that didn't work out either. Speaking of the AFC West, story number 3 today. Sean Payton trying to further minimize the dust up between he and Bo Nix. We were just talking about this, but if you're just tuning in, Sean Payton said that he is, quote, looking for players with passion for football. And he's got that in Bo Nix. And he again said, it's nothing to see here. What happened on the sideline after that drop pass by Trey Franklin was healthy. It's healthy. And it shows development. It shows that Bo Nix, if he feels he is right, is willing to stand up to Sean Payton. And Sean Payton wants to be challenged on that level. Now, Bo Nix may not win the argument, but Sean Payton wants to see that Bo Nix cares and is competitive, but he also wants to hear Bo Nix and his thoughts and see if he's thinking the game. And I think that's what most people around here identified. Nationally, not so much, but they're not in it on a day-by-day basis. Here locally, we know what that was about, and we know that that's nothing but good. Maybe Bo Nix can dial it back. But overall, healthy, good for Bo Nix, Sean Payton, and the Denver Broncos. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. Our question of the day: after 3 straight wins by the Denver Broncos, are the playoffs in this team's future? Continue to take your thoughts on that coming up next. Third story really should have been the story out of New Orleans because it is of interest to you if you are a Broncos fan. Derek Carr is expected to miss the next 2 games at least with an oblique injury that he sustained in last night's loss to the Saints, which means it will not be Jake Haener, maybe. That's who came in for Derek Carr at the end of that game last night. Jake Haener of Fresno State fame. It could be another rookie, Spencer Rattler. Not that Jake Haener's a rookie, but it could be Bo Nix, a rookie, against Spencer Rattler, a rookie. Wouldn't that add to the intrigue? Rumors out there that Spencer Rattler's a possibility for the Broncos game on a Thursday night here, October 17th. By the way, I'll be doing the show live from Trainwreck, downtown Colorado Springs, 812 South Sierra Madre that day. Want to come out? Be a good place to watch the game. Rattler versus Nix sounds more fun than Nix versus Haener. But it goes back to what I think that the Sean Payton and the Broncos are banking on this year, or would need to bank on, I should say, if they're going to make the playoffs. Getting to our question of the day that people have been weighing in on, and I invite you to do the same, 719-247-1313. If the Broncos are going to make the playoffs, the way that they look right now, things would have to happen to other teams. And lo and behold, something has happened to the Saints. But the point is that after beating the Raiders, as fun as that win might have been, and as much as I think it shows this team is pointed in the right direction, that's a bigger picture. That's a longer term thing. They still have a rookie quarterback. They still are almost devoid of pass catchers. There are holes on this roster that Sean Payton is going to have to address in the next couple of off seasons. But my perspective has changed a little bit on the Denver Broncos. I think they will win more games than I expected them to. But they're going to need some significant breaks or multiple breaks along the way when it comes to other teams in the AFC or other teams on their schedule for me to believe that they can really be a playoff team this year. The incomparable Sean Martinez utilizing a feature. It's very cool about the live video broadcast of this show. You can just comment right there on social media, X, Facebook, and I can display it like this if you're watching. See, boom, Sean Martinez, there he is. Denver has a playoff defense, but not a playoff offense. Yep. And that's why I said they're going to have to show more. And to me, the only thing that they could possibly show in terms of an additional dimension is by letting Bo Nix throw the football. And it goes back to what I said yesterday. It's time for Sean Payton to allow Bo Nix to throw the football with some consequence. It's part of the development as a quarterback, and it just feels like Sean Payton has wanted to get to a certain number of wins at a certain point of the season before maybe he'd feel comfortable turning Bo loose. Because I feel like he's now stacked up 3 weeks of glimpses, at the very least, glimpses certainly in the Jets game, but more than that in both the Raiders and the Bucs game, that he should be allowed to try some of that stuff in the middle of the game when the game's still in the balance. And I think he's wrestling a little bit internally between his desire to win football games, because he has something at stake here as well, and developing Bo Nix. But I think it's time, and I don't think that the opponent they have on Sunday, they're going to be able to do to them what they did to the Raiders. The Chargers are different. Their quarterback is different. And I'm not trying to take away anything from Riley Moss or Pat Surtain, but give a little tip of the cap to Gardner Minshew on those two throws, yeah? It's a different animal that's visiting Empower Field on Sunday. Better coached. Better quarterback. To beat the Chargers, I think that Bo Nix, they're going to need Bo Nix to make some plays through the air. But if they do that and he's successful, then that's when you say, okay, this Broncos offense that, as Sean pointed out, is not a playoff offense. Maybe they could become that. But that's the only added dimension that I can see the Broncos adding that would make me think that the playoffs are a real possibility. But they're better than I thought they would be. And certainly I think that they can have a win total that will be satisfying to a lot of Broncos fans, knowing that you're just getting started with Bo Nix. But that's not 10, and that's not in getting to the playoffs. Continuing to take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. Paul weighing in. Welcome back to the fold, Paul. Says Peyton definitely needs to open the offense up, need to start pushing deeper plays. It will open up the running game too. And that's something that Aaron Rodgers was talking about the other day, because they're having their issues running the football. And even though I don't agree with what Aaron Rodgers did or did not do today when it comes to the Robert Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett, I do think he's right. He knows NFL offenses. Sometimes the pass can open up the run. And I actually remember Adam Archuleta talking about that a few weeks ago when it pertains to the Denver Broncos. Now, I don't think it is as imperative as it was a few weeks ago, because you have very encouraging signs from Javonte Williams the last 2 weeks in that regard. While Sean Payton has been keeping Bo Nix boxed up a little bit. But it's time. And again, the biggest thing, the best thing that could come out of this season for the Denver Broncos is you go, Bo Nix, yep. They got their guy. Not going to do that with him averaging 2.5 yards of completion. But I get it. Sean Payton has something at stake too. I'm not trying to be overly critical of Sean Payton, because I get it. He has something at stake too. And if this team stumbles to 4 or 5 wins, what is going to be said about him? That's why I feel like he's trying. It just feels like he's trying to get to a certain point. I don't know what that point is. I don't think it's necessarily based on what Bo Nix is showing him. I think it feels like he wants to get to a certain win total at a certain point. And then he'll let Bo Nix air it out more with the risk that he could cost them a game. But what I'm saying, I'm turning it the other way and saying some of the games that they have coming up over the next 2 months, they need Bo Nix to be successful through the air in order to win. And I think it starts this week with LA. 719-247-1313. More hockey going on as the reigning Stanley Cup champions will open their season against Boston. Certainly two teams that are on the short list of Stanley Cup contenders. So that game's getting underway. And then the nightcap tonight is what I'm looking forward to. Utah Hockey Club and the Fighting Connor Bedards. And then tomorrow night, the Avs take on the Vegas Golden Knights. 719-247-1313. Do want to tell you that you can now use your body's own healing properties Couple of other items of note today. Things are continuing to get worse for the Las Vegas Raiders. So we have a quarterback benching. We have a star wide receiver wanting a trade. We have a winning streak against a division rival coming to an end. And now Christian Wilkins, one of the better free agent acquisitions this summer. Summer. Is out indefinitely with a Jones fracture. Don't ask me what that is. But fracture sounds bad. And the prognosis is not good for Christian Wilkins. So, yeah, it's getting closer and closer to Shedeur Sanders against Bo Nix for the next 10 years. That's just, and maybe you're a fan of one of these organizations, but they're just some organizations that, like, they do a lot of harm to themselves because of their mismanagement or because of how cheap they are or whatever the reason. But then it's like that almost begats more misfortune that they weren't trying. Like, they spent, and I'm not saying that the Raiders are necessarily cheap, although Mark Davis has been accused of that in the past, but firing as many coaches as he's done, and eating that salary, I think he's kind of done a little bit of work in that area to say, okay, maybe he's not the most cheap owner that there is. But there's no doubt this is kind of a mess of an organization right now. And it's like they actually do a good thing. You know what I compare this to? And it's not a direct comparison, but it just reminds me of it. Like the Rockies with Chris Bryant. Like, file it under certain organizations can't have nice things. Right? Christian Wilkins is a huge get for the Raiders. Now he's hurt. For the Rockies, they have no business. And Chris Bryant is a good baseball player. Like, none of this is about his talent. But they bring him in. They had no business landing Chris Bryant. They did, for reasons that are still not completely clear to me, but maybe out of some desperation to get a lucrative deal done on Chris Bryant's part because deals weren't coming in. But he shows up on the Rockies and he immediately breaks. Some organizations can have nice things, which, if you're a CU fan, should make you a little nervous about Shedeur ending up there, I suppose. But there are organizations that even when they kind of do the right thing and a good thing, it backfires. But it's because of, it almost feels because of their gross mismanagement in a lot of other ways. Some kind of weird cosmic sports karma. Bad organizations don't get nice things. But it has been a rough week and a half for the Vegas Raiders and their fan base. Speaking of a organization that can have nice things, the Colorado Rockies have extended the contract of Bud Black. So clearly Bud Black is not done managing yet. And look, he's stuck it out this long. I don't know how he has, but if he wants to sign on for another year of this, then it's his life. Right. And it's not like the Rockies have some grand plans cooked up that they, need to not have Bud Black as their manager. Part of me thinks that it would be good for the Rockies to have Bud Black and Charlie Blackmon both call it a career and kind of start fresh with new direction, new people. But I know that they're not going to do that. So if Bud Black wants to keep managing, let him keep managing. It's hardly their biggest issue. But this is very on brand. Anybody at all gonna, to bring the show full circle, because we started talking about Woody Johnson looking for a human sacrifice after the Jets lost pretty embarrassingly in back-to-back weeks. Is there going to be any sacrifice for the Colorado Rockies? Anybody? A hitting coach, a bullpen coach, a GM, a manager, an owner? Are they tarping the party deck for a year until the team can start winning games? Nope. Not yet, anyway. Nobody. Another 100-loss season, which even as poor as the Rockies have been, they, for the longest time, never had 100 losses, and now it's an every-year thing. Anybody going to be held responsible? No? Okay, cool. Just making sure. Oh, Charlie Blackmon retired. That's what it was. Charlie Blackmon is taking the blame, being forced into retirement by the Rockies. That's what's going on. And that's why I say I don't blame the Jets and Woody Johnson for wanting to fire someone to shake things up. Like, it's what teams do. It's just who he decided to fire brings into question how much Aaron Rodgers had to say on the matter and whether he's actually doing something that could help his football team. But I guess in a way, it makes a little bit of sense, because if Nathaniel Hackett is the brightest offensive mind on the Jets staff, then who honestly are they going to go to if they fire Hackett? I guess that argument could be made. But part of me says addition by subtraction. Like, I get it. Fan bases have that bloodlust. They want somebody to pay. And that might be a little aggressive, but I think that's kind of the emotion. You want somebody to answer for it, not because, you wish bad things on somebody, but you just want to see an organization saying, this isn't good enough. We're trying something. Firing Nathaniel Hackett would have accomplished that. And that's the biggest part of this, is that firing Nathaniel Hackett, people would say, well, it's the 27th ranked offense in the NFL, and you're not going to bench Aaron Rodgers. So obviously that's that's the place that you would go. So it's like, even the Jets doing something, and I know Robert Saleh is not the most popular guy in New York. But if you want this to be anything other than just appeasing fans who are fed up with what they've seen, which doesn't necessarily make your organization better. Shouldn't you try to make a change in the area that you are suffering in? Because comparing this to the Broncos firing Hackett, like, trust me, it's not just, hey, our offense isn't good, we're firing Nathaniel Hackett. There is more to that. There is more to that you know, and there's more to that maybe you don't know. Just saying. But Nathaniel Hackett wasn't just, hey, we're firing Nathaniel Hackett, the head coach, because our offense is bad. But their offense was bad. So it kind of worked. But you got to have more catastrophic organization-wide failures to fire head coach. Like, that's what it's supposed to be, right? I don't know if that was totally going on with the Jets. And there was a natural starting point that, for whatever reason, and I think we know the reason, Woody Johnson went in a different direction. And now it's the reports from Adam Schefter that the trade talks with the Raiders and Jets and Raiders and Saints have started to slow a little bit regarding Davante Adams. Don't know what side of the aisle that's coming from, but I mean, if I were Davante Adams and I was helping the Raiders pick where I landed, I don't know that I'd want to go to the Jets, but apparently he's still very much excited about the idea of potentially playing with Aaron Rodgers. So maybe winning isn't at the top of Davante Adams' priority list. Which at this point, I don't know if it is for Aaron Rodgers either. So they're two peas in a pod. All right. What do we got tonight? Utah Hockey Club and Chicago Blackhawks in the NHL. And Game 3. Los Angeles, San Diego. If you're looking to get a bet down before that game gets started at 7 o'clock, may I suggest Circa Sports Colorado app. Been using their app for a while now. Gosh, month, 2 months, something like that. And what they told me was, don't just delete the app that you have. Like, compare, contrast, see if it's a better experience. For me, the better on Circa Sports Colorado, and I found that it is. Other sports books do these big promos to get you in. With Circa Sports Colorado, their lines are their promos. They don't limit players based on their winnings. They keep as little money as possible on large market bets like futures and golf tournaments. So see for yourself what I'm seeing. Download the Circa Sports Colorado app today. Must be 21 years or older and present in Colorado to bet. If you have a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. That's it for me, whether it's hockey, baseball. Enjoy whatever sport you may be watching tonight, and we'll reconvene tomorrow at 3 to talk about it here on Extra Sports 1300. We'll hear the radio.